Okay, so I'm going to run my last version of the code. We've gotten pretty far. We've done a lot of the functionality that we're going for. Saving comics, retrieving comics. We're getting to the part of editing comics. So I'm going to run this again just to see how it goes, and then we'll continue on editing a comic. So as usual, you have to create an account because you did turn off your computer. So I'm going to create an account. I'm going to sign in with that account, and I'll just save some comics. I am going to fill in all of the fields maybe just to have some data. I'll fill in like 3 comics. Okay, so I've saved 3 items. Looking at my console, everything looks fine. When I view the comic, okay, I've got 3 comics. And we left off in trying to retrieve the details. So clicking on the little speech bubble pops up the comics info. There's that comic that I saved there. There's its information. So if I go up to edit, this is where we last left off. We click the edit button. You get a brand new edit screen. We had that cancel. We made cancel do its thing. But then update doesn't do anything yet except to say or to respond that yes, you're about to edit the comic. Well, the idea will be that the fields of the comic will be populated into this form. And then if I wanted to change the number or the year or whatever, I would be able to update, and then it would update it internally. Well, I want these items to get passed into this form. So we'll go back to our code, index.js. We'll go to our edit, our fn edit comic. fn edit comic isn't doing that much at the moment. It's just saying a console message. This is the comic we're about to edit, comic whip, comic work in progress, and then it pops open the form where the comic fields will be displayed. Okay, before we pop up that form, we want to populate those form fields. So let's make some space before that, and we'll say get the fields of the comic in question and add them to the form. So I clicked on the comic Amazing, number 1. And I want all of the fields to appear on screen. Well, I need to retrieve all relevant fields from the database and then put them into that form that's waiting for me. So to get from the database, db.get. We're going to get all of the fields of a particular comic. Comic whip. This is what's keeping track of the current comic in question. I want to view the details of a particular comic. I click the little speech bubble. On another function there, it assigned the value of the comic in question to comic whip. Now we can use that to retrieve a particular comic. Well, as usual, we have a function that has an error or success. If we successfully retrieved the comic in question, we want to put those fields in the form, or else somehow we didn't successfully retrieve the fields, so we'll say some sort of error message. I'm going to break apart to the curly braces and write my usual note. That's the end of .get. Because if I have the two possibilities of error or success, I have a conditional statement. I have the if-else to deal with. So I'll start that if-else, noting the end of if-else. We've seen this a few times before. It should be familiar. We always have some sort of error or success result from any pouch operation, .put, .get, .destroy, etc. We're using the same sort of idiom over and over, that there must be some error or success. So if there was an error, we'll give ourselves a quick console message for either or, and then the actual population of the fields is pretty easy. The point here is that I need to get all of the fields of the comic. Once I have them, we'll put them on screen. But dealing with an error, we have some console log output. Error getting the comic. And then whatever error message it gives, so we can try to troubleshoot it. So if we got the error, okay, if we've got the success, same thing, console log success, and then the actual command success, getting comic. So our note, question.
Just out of curiosity, because before it's always been failure success. Is there a reason why you're switching to error?
Oh, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
I must be a little sleepy. No, it doesn't matter. This can be anything that you want. It can be called cat, and as long as it's consistently cat, it'll work. But let's keep it consistent. That's a very good point. Why did I choose error? Failure, yes, we were always doing failure. As long as these two are the same, this will work just fine. But let's keep it consistent. Good point. We've had failure or success. If there's a failure, proceed. Again, we could have called it, dog and cat. So if there's a dog here, then it did that, or else cat. So as long as it's consistent. Okay, let me pass out the Thursday one. Here we'll get the Tuesday sign-in. So, sign in for today. Okay, failure or success. If there was a success, okay, the val method can be used to read or write data to a field, a form field, an input field. So we've previously used .val to read what's in that field. What did they type? We can also use .val to write something there. And that's what we want here. We have those fields that are waiting for us, that are empty. I don't want to type them manually. I want the system to do it for me. So we're going to write some things into those fields. Those fields, just to remind me also, question?
You changed the word error in 2 places. Did you change it the first place?
Yes, good point there as well. So if we're trying to show there's an error object that it returns to us, let's display it. We called it failure here, yes, whoops, should have been failure here as well. So good. So that would have given an error that we can't show the error. That's very meta. Okay, failure. So we're going to use .val to write a value into those fields. I'm just going to pop over to the index file quickly to remind myself what are those called. Probably something consistent. Let's see, options, view comic, edit comic. Okay, so in the, just FYI, in the section of edit comics, we called each of these labels in title edit, in number edit, in year edit, in publisher edit, in notes edit. So in each of those, we're going to put values into those fields. So I'm just going to show it side by side because I'm going to forget what they're called 5 seconds later. So we want, okay, so these vals are going to be, with the jQuery selector, we find something with a certain ID in title edit, and then .val. Well, .val by itself would say, let's read the value of that field. At this time, we're going to insert something. So if we were inserting Spider-Man, don't type this yet, but if we were inserting into that input field that string, we would just write it like that. So now we're about to write the word Spider-Man into that field. Obviously, it's got to be dynamic because of the particular comic we clicked on. We clicked on this comic, so put its title in there. We clicked on that comic, put that one in there. So we have success.title. Success is the object, is the representation of the comic. When we try to get, let's see if I can fit it all on one screen. Sorry about this. Let's see here. When we try to do db.get, we're saying, let's get all of the fields of a comic. Success, we got all of the fields. Success is that object. It has all of the fields. The title, the year, the publisher, the notes, etc. So we can then say, the title property of the success object, give me the title of the comic and put it into that input field waiting for me. Well, then it's just a little bit of repetition here. Then do it for pound in number edit. We will set a value, which is that particular comic's number. And then on the next field, in an input field with an ID of in year edit, we will set a value. This current comic, it's year. You see where I'm going with the rest of them. So in publisher, publisher.val, success.publisher, and so far we've gotten up to notes. In notes edit, val, success, notes, okay, so the edit comic function, one of the things it's doing to prepare us to be able to edit the comic is to populate the fields. So if we wanted to change something, it's there on screen so we can make a change. And that's what we did there. Get the comic, populate the fields. So that comic, that function did that. Next, let's assume the person's going to add notes or change the notes or delete the notes or the number or whatever, and then they click submit or update. We call the button update. So we're going to need to make the update button take over and start to run and do its thing. But we'll confirm that this works so far. Go ahead and save it and run it. Go look at your table of comics, go to the View Comics screen, click on one of the View More buttons, and then go to the Edit button of the comic you're looking at and see if those fields populate. Let me just confirm mine's working, and then we'll proceed. Alright, so bringing up my console, going to View, I've got some comics. I'll click on the first one, get that normal one pop-up. Okay, I'm going to go to Edit, and then the form pops up, populated with the items from that comic. So obviously I want to put in a real publisher and so forth. The full update button won't work yet, but up to this point it should at least populate the fields. Let's do a little bit more code, then we'll do the help. So it's not quite there. Let's just progress for the moment. So this edit comic is supposed to prepare it for us to then be able to edit those forms. Question?
Did you run?
Yeah.
Because on line 632, you don't have a closing dependency.
Yep, it's all the way down here. So I always write it out first, and then I break it apart to the next lines, because there's usually stuff in between. Okay, so the update button, we've got a function that's supposed to take care of that. 656 function edit comic submit. We've got the cancel and the submit. Cancel is very easy. It's just close the dialog box. We're not actually going to make changes, so we close it. Well, the edit comics submit, that's where some more important stuff happens. We'll say the note. Read again the contents of each of the input form fields, to process them. Okay, so it's going to pull up a comic, and maybe I never added the publisher, and then now I'm going to edit it and add the publisher, and I want to click Update. So we need to read those fields again. And if they never changed a particular field, well, fine, we'll just read it again and save it again with no changes. But if they did make a change to any of those fields, and we save it, we want to update any of those fields. Well, actually, this should be after prevent default. Let's move it down there. We want prevent default to be early on there so that the screen doesn't refresh. And then our code follows after that. So we'll create some variables to keep track of what's in those fields. $val. Now right here I'm calling it val, and I'll show you why in a moment. Val in title edit. Instead of L for element, I'll explain why in a moment. I'm going to say $jQuery selector, go find something with an ID in title edit .val. In other instances of the code, we kind of took two steps. we created a variable val var L in title, searching for the particular element. Then at a later point, we read the value and stored it in some variable. Here, I'm doing kind of both at once in terms of, let's create a variable. Let's go find an instance of that HTML node and read the value of it right away and store it in a variable. Obviously, our variables can be called anything we want. So here, I'm prefixing it with val just to let myself know when I look at this later on, oh, there's a value in here already. The other instances were the whole element, the whole node, the whole child, the whole tag, everything in the tag. Here I only want the value. Comma, because I also need to do this for the other fields. In number, in year, in publisher, in notes, same way. We're creating a variable with the value of the input field of number in the edit form, and that's assigned to using the jQuery selector to go search for something with an ID of in number in the edit form and get me its value. So originally the form is empty. When we wrote it in the HTML document, it's empty. The function a moment ago populated these fields. We had .val and then put something in it. And if they made changes, well, we want to read again what's in them. So let's read what's in them again and store them in a variable so we can do something with them. Val, next one, val in year, edit, is equal to in year edit the value that's in there at the moment. And then val in publisher, edit, pound in publisher edit, the value, val in notes edit, value, and then end of statement. To kind of confirm that this stuff is working, a little console output might be useful. Now, one thing we can do is chain together. We haven't really done it this way, but if we put multiple items like this via commas, we will output each of those values in a very basic output without any message or anything. Val in number is just to confirm that I'm reading what I expect. Val in year. All of those variables that I just created, let's output them. For troubleshooting purposes, I think this is very helpful. It is very verbose. In a sense, you could say it's not necessary if we know it works, but especially as beginners, we might want to really check ourselves. And so we're saying in the console, let's output each of those fields that we just read the values of. We'll display it in the console. we're able to save it and then test it so that we can kind of confirm that it's on track. Question?
The very, very end of that line, is there anything after the notes edit, like if there's a recalling note, if it's all within
The console log method ends, so we need the ending parenthesis and the end of statement semicolon. We can test this, we can save it and run it, and the way to test this is we select one of our comics, we view the details of the comic, we go to Edit button, and the fields should populate from previously. But then, to kind of test this, you can change all of the fields, just to see what that's like, change all of the fields that were pre-populated for us, and click Update. And in the console, it will tell you everything you typed in there. And if we confirm that if we can confirm what we're getting in there, then we can then resave it back to the database coming up. Let me take a quick look at mine just to see it works, and then I'll come back. Question?
Oh, I'm just hoping to history.
Okay, let me just check if mine works. Like I said, let's do a little bit of code, and then we'll do help in a moment. So I'm going to view comics. Going to view up here. Edit. So there's stuff filled in. Just to show you, I'm going to change this completely. I'll put some numbers here. Obviously, this is not anything correct, but I'm just going to put something in those fields. And then I'll update. The edit comics function is running, and it saw that in each of those fields, that's what I typed in. So obviously, we're going to have real. We're going to type real things like, okay, the publisher is wrong, so I typed the real publisher, and the notes is, third issue. Without making any changes to those, it's still going to read, okay, there was the name of the title, the number, the year, and then the other notes and items that I wrote. So those things will be inserted back into the database in a moment.
Mine gets undefined.
We'll do a little bit more code, and then we'll do help in a moment. Question? Yeah, we'll do a little bit more code, and then we'll do help in a moment.
what you're getting is.
So the values here are either new data or data that we're going to leave alone. We're not going to change the title. We wrote it properly. We're not going to change the year. That was correct. But maybe we wrote the wrong publisher or the wrong notes. So it's going to read it regardless and then do something with it. Next lines. So according to the Pouch documentation, the best way to update an existing document in the database is to first confirm that it exists in the database and then update it. So we'll make the notes. First check if the comic in question exists. And then update any fields. db.get is the way that we can first confirm that the data in question exists. And again, we're using comic whip. That's the comic in question. That's the variable keeping track of the current comic we're working with, the work in progress one. There is a failure or success. This time I'll write it correctly, failure or success. If there was a failure in getting the comic, we'll deal with that. If there was a success in getting the comic, okay, then let's reinsert the data into the database. So I'm going to break apart the curly braces over here and note end.get. And in between, as usual, we'll have the if-else, if failure versus else success. If failure. Do another console message over here. Could not find comic. Versus about to update comic. Like most things, there's a few steps. It just doesn't do it. The command to just do it is straightforward, but there's often a little bit of process or setup beforehand. So here, we have to first confirm, does that comic exist that you're about to change? There really shouldn't be any way that we ever trigger failure here. We're kind of at a point where we've saved the comic. We've gone through enough layers that we've saved things in a way that it shouldn't trigger a failure. But the output here might help us figure out what's going on. So really, we should only have a success. Let's say after confirming comic exists, resave it to pouch, and include a new revision number. Which is going to be revision number field, which is going to be underscore rev. Okay, so underscore ID is a very important field that is basically what keeps track of every item in the database. But there's also another one, underscore rev, that keeps track of revisions or changes to the data. And automatically, you have one dash something, some unique identifier. And every time we make a change, it'll automatically do 2 dash something, 3 dash something, for as much memory as you have, which is unlimited, sort of. And so when we make a change, we also have to include, this is version 2 of the data. db.put. So .put has been used to save something for the first time, but .put is also used for saving updates. But when you're saving updates, you also have to include a rev, a new revision, a new version. And for this, I'm going to break apart the put parentheses like this, just for readability. And .put for updating the comic. We're going to reinsert the data into the database in JSON format. We're going to list the particular fields, the title, the year, publisher, etc. Those are going to be populated with the brand new entries that we've captured up here. In theory, if a person changed the publisher or added a publisher, we want to reinsert those. So let me write it here first, and then you'll see what you need to do. We're going to have, again, the underscore ID. We're going to have the title. This is incomplete, but I want to show it to you this way first. The number, the year, the publisher, the notes, and then we need the new one that says this is a new version of the data, underscore rev. That underscore is very important. So these are the fields we created before when we first saved the comic. We have title, number, etc. And remember, we have to have that unique ID, underscore ID, to keep track of the different comics. Now we need a new version, version 2, or 200. So the ID field, colon,
Do we really need to save the version number?
definitely. It'll give you an error if you don't, because it'll say there's already a comic named Amazing Spider-Man #1. We are not trying to put a new comic, Amazing Spider-Man #1. We're trying to put an update. We put new notes. We change the publisher. We change something about it. So there has to be a new version number.
As it's all internal?
Yeah, it's all internal. We program it, and it's all internal, and it'll work just fine for the user. But internally, we have to do the legwork of setting it up to work properly.
Okay, can I start typing now?
Yes, but do you know what you're typing?
I don't have a choice not to type it, so I'm seeing you type all this stuff, and I feel like I'm
Let me finish. Let me start typing it here. So we have, these are the internal fields, and then we have the colon something, colon something, colon something. Okay, well, success is the comic currently in question and its ID, so just reinsert. We're dealing with a particular comic, same by the same ID. We're going to reinsert it. And then the title is what they just typed right now, of val in title, and the colon of val in number. Question?
Yeah, can I make a guess about, do we have to put like plus plus for the rev to increment ourselves, or is it on?
It's going to be automatic. That's a good point. That's a good question about there. Do we plus plus it to increment it? It's much more than simply number 1, 2, 3. It's got a number, an incremental number, plus dash a bunch of gibberish, its own unique identifier as well. So we're not just going to plus plus it, but it'll do it for us when we see what we do here. So in year, and then val in publisher, and then val in notes. And here's a difference. The revision is going to be success dot underscore rev. So it will basically determine a new revision number. And right here then we're putting back into the database any updates to that comic. Okay, so I wanted to write it out like this. You may have started typing it. That's fine. I'm also going to maybe space it out a little bit like this. Just that's optional. And when you save it, it'll probably put it back. I noticed that Visual Studio sometimes rearranges your code when you put spaces and tabs. Maybe there's a setting somewhere in the settings to turn that off. But see, now here's the big idea that we've got the curly braces, which is we're about to reinsert a JSON formatted object into Pouch. Well, it's one that has already existed. So it's this comic that we successfully are working with. This particular ID is the one we're talking about. If we made a change to the title, reinsert it. If we didn't, well, it'll save it the same as before. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, etc. If we added brand new notes, we never had notes, let's add those new notes back into the database. And then let it automatically put a new version number, a new revision.
Do you need semicolon?
No, all of this is inside of the JSON object. We don't put the semicolon in there. We only put the commas in between each particular field. And then on the last one, there's no final comma or semicolon or anything. The only semicolon is right over here, which is at the end of dot put. So go ahead and type that. Then we'll deal with, okay, if we're trying to put, which is an operation pouch action, there's always then going to be a failure or success. We'll deal with that in a moment. But this is what we're trying to reinsert into the database. These are all of the fields of the comic plus the new rev. Okay, so this this curly brace right here, add a comma, because we have to deal with the function of failure or success. It's going to look a little different from before, but it's going to be the same thing as we've done before. And then we had db.something with some parameters, and then comma, function, failure, success, and then if, else, and so forth. So it's going to look a little bit odd here, but following it back, there's the curly braces of the object we're reinserting into the database, comma, if that was successful or a failure. I'm going to break those curly braces apart. This is end dot put failure success. Okay, well, if there was a failure or a success, this is where we deal with if failure or else success. So the if-else is inside of that anonymous function. After attempting to put in the data, then we either get a failure or success. My curly brace ends the anonymous function. Then as usual, we deal with a failure or success. And so it's opening and closing curly braces. So some messages in the console. Error. Whatever that failure message was, or success. So ultimately, db.put is the command that we're using to update an item in the database. We had to kind of layer some other things around it. But once we get to that success part, it's done. In the database, behind the scenes, it's done. We updated the database. Behind the scenes. In front of the scenes, in the front end, for the user, what do you think we might need to do for the user? Because in the back end, we have a console message, success. But for the user, what do you think we need to do once the back end stuff is done?
They have a pop-up that says update made.
Make a pop-up that says success update, maybe, sure. Anything else? Put the new information on screen, yeah. So there's a few things to do for the user to let them know that it worked. Because behind the scenes it worked. But for the user, not quite yet. So we'll make some notes here. After updating data, we want to do a few things. Now, I'm not actually going to do a pop-up message that says, we updated your comic. I think that we could add that in. I didn't plan on adding it in. What I'm planning is, we did the updates and made the changes, and we closed the current screen, because remember, we've got two screens popped up. We've got the edit screen, but below that was the view the comic screen. So if we edited the comic, let's close that screen, and it takes us back to view comics, which has been updated. So I don't think we need an extra message that says, you updated the comic, because we're just going to see the comics that got updated. And we need to close that pop-up in front of us. We need to update the comic pop-up, and we need to update the table behind all of that, because that table might have had something changed as well. So we'll say close edit pop-up screen. Update view more pop-up screen. And update table of comics. At least. We could also have it play a sound, we could have it vibrate, we could make that other pop-up message that appears, anything. But at the very least, this is what I'm planning here. So remember when we go to view comics screen, we have a table of comics. We click the little speech bubble, and that pops up that new screen. That's that view. That's that view more of that comic screen. Okay, so I think the easiest way to do this is the view more comes from the remember how we have all of those paragraphs. We have a paragraph with the title and the year and the publisher, and we did the trick about paragraph equals 0, paragraph equals 1, paragraph equals 2. We filled in all of those fields. I think we can copy and paste a little bit over here. Let me back up. What I mean is that we've got a part of the code where we've already got that working. We need to copy and paste it in. It should be something like this. Div view comics info. Yeah, I think we can grab that. Those this view more pop-up was first populated this way. So we should be able to copy that mostly. Let me just confirm here. EQ 0. Yeah, okay, that should work. If you back up to the area, let's see, where's this at? This is under the function show comics info. If you back up a little bit to the function show comics info, wherever your numbers are at. Mine's at about 580. Go find your function, show comics. So we had that function that was in charge of populating that view more fields. So we should be able to copy all of those, EQ 0 to 4. We're going to need to tweak them a little bit, but instead of retyping the whole thing, I'm going to copy those and paste it, and instead of this success stuff, it'll be slightly different, but the rest should be the same because we're dealing with these particular fields. Let me also confirm over here, just a moment. In the pop-ups, yeah, div view comics, yeah, okay. So I'm going to copy those from 0 to 4. Back to the one in question. Here we go. So this is where we were at, where we had our notes. Okay, we want to update the view comics for a pop-up. So I just copied all of those items and I'm going to paste it in. Because again, go to the first paragraph in this view comics div and write something there, which we need to change in a moment. Go to the second paragraph and write something, and the third, etc. Well, the something is not success, etc. anymore. It's what's in those fields. It's the val in title edit. These variables at the moment are what's storing the comic, the year, the publisher, the notes, or whatever was changed. This one's number. Val in year. Publisher notes. So this is taking care of the update view more pop-up. We're updating the HTML in each of these paragraphs with the last version of any changes. Function show comics prep was the function that starts the process of updating the table on screen. The table of our comics.
Just playing catch up so that the only thing that we changed was the $sign val in title for those 4 or 5 items.
Yes, exactly. Instead of success.title, it's the name of each of those variables. So we're rewriting the we're redrawing the table, and then we're going to close the current screen. So next is the current dialog box. Let's close it. Let's see, we call that dialog box pop edit comics info. Dialog close. So we've done that before. When there's a pop-up on screen that we need to close programmatically, we reference it. It is currently popped up as a dialog, but then we say the close parameter. So you see here we're updating the fields first on the pop-up, then we're updating the table, and then we're closing the edit pop-up. We're finished editing it. do, for example, up here, just the notes, to do, also add a pop-up confirming with confirmation message. We're not going to get to it, but based on what we've done before, looking at previous code, you should be able to do it. But we could also make a pop-up message that says you updated the comic, and then it updates the items, and then it closes the current dialog, and then it takes you back to see your changes. I think at this point it's testable. You should be able to go over to a particular comic and edit a comic. Like I've got a few comics here with gibberish in the notes and the publisher. I'm going to go to those and put something real and try to update them and see if I get my updates. You can confirm that it worked by looking at your database viewer, or also after you edit a comic, it should show the pop-up that's got the different changes. Let me run mine. I'll get back to my code in a moment. I just want to confirm that mine works. So I'm going to view a comic. I've got this one up here, amazing. I'm going to edit that one. Publisher is gibberish, but I'll put something real. Put something here, very valuable issue. I'll do update. So in my console, it says I'm doing all of that. I should have cleared it, but I'm about to edit that particular comic. There was a success. It reran the prep comic. There's 3 comics there, etc. Did you see that it closed the edit pop-up, and then now this info screen, the view more screen, has been updated with the new publisher. And the notes that I wrote were also edited. I can do it one more time. Let's say this time, just to change this, DC Comics, I'll say new series. I made a misspelling, but I can fix that too. So I'll do update my output out here. More importantly, on screen, it shows that I updated it there. And then when I look at the database, application, IndexedDB, by sequence, so I was editing comic amazing. There is the original version, version 1 dash whatever, which had the gibberish, and then there was a version 2 dash whatever with that change, and now a 3rd version. So Pouch is storing different versions of your data. It would be up to us to program an undo sort of thing, but at least here I am seeing some changes. If I close this pop-up and I go to some other comic over here, so it was actually issue number 2 that I saved from the year 2001 and from Zero Comics Co. And we'll say hologram cover. So clearing the console, doing an update there, made an update, stuff got changed over here, stuff got changed over here, and in the database viewer, I might refresh that, I've got a new entry.
Mine's not refreshing. I mean, mine's not updating the new ones, and it's going to be undefined after I try to edit it.
So over here we see that it's got the version 2 of the data, and Pouch will do that automatically. Whenever, if we set it up properly, it's going to automatically do a new revision. That was the whole purpose of that _rev. So at this point, if it worked, we'll we'll pause for a break. If it didn't, we'll figure out the code. 7:15-ish. We'll take a break until 7:25, and then we'll be back.
Can you tell that to,
Yes, just